Larry Johnson. I am a professor here at Texas A&M University, and today we're going to talk about the respiratory system. We'll talk about the objectives, the features and functions, ventilation mechanisms, conducting portion and the respiratory portion of the respiratory system, types of epithelium and their locations.
Our objectives are to look at the histologic characteristics of the components of both the conducting and the respiratory portions of the respiratory system, and to see how these characteristics allow each component to contribute to the overall function of the respiratory system. Now, the function of the respiratory system is gas exchange, and that's a requirement for higher animals, which is what we are. You have to have oxygen from the environment and get rid of carbon dioxide, and that is carried out by the respiratory system that has a gases exchange that occurs. Oxygen diffuses out and carbon dioxide diffuses into the airspace of the alveolus. So here's the alveolus here. Here's the blood capillary coming through there. So the blood is bringing carbon dioxide rich blood in through there, and the carbon dioxide diffuses out from the blood into the airspace, and oxygen is brought in by breathing in, and that oxygen is high concentration here. It diffuses into the blood space that you can see. So the respiratory system has two portions. It has a conducting portion that interacts with the environment. That's how we are exposed to things, by inhalation. So it's a conduit that goes to the outside and then goes deep within the lungs. So you have a series of branching, trachea, bronchus, bronchioles, all these are part of the conducting portion. And then there's a respiratory portion which actually has a gases exchange. This is alveolus, this is the capillary, carbon dioxide goes into the airspace, oxygen comes out of the airspace. So in order to facilitate gas exchange, you have to have a mechanism by which you have oxygen, air, in close proximity to the blood capillaries, as you see in through there. So in the wall of the air spaces, or little air balloons, you will have capillaries. So you have gases exchange. Oxygen comes out of the airspace into the blood. The carbon dioxide gets out of the blood into the airspace to be discharged. In order to do that, you have to ventilate, and there's certain mechanisms that allow us to do so. First of all, we have a thoracic cage. We have a rib cage through there, and they're attached at the backbone, as we can see. And between those, we have muscles, intercostal muscles. So the thoracic cage is a bony cavity in which the lungs can reside and can expand. And then we have these muscles, and some of the muscles pull up the rib, other muscles pull down the rib. This is the internal and the external intercostal muscles. And since you have both of those go in and out, they contribute to both inspiration and expiration as they increase the size of the cavity, the bony cavity that's within. Also, there's a diaphragm. Here we see a diaphragm in the dog. This would be where the lungs would be. Part of the thoracic cage has been removed here for you to see. There's a heart, and here's a diaphragm in a drawing for the human. The diaphragm only is involved in inspiration of air. The discharge of air is passive by the elastic tissue that is inside there. You can see the elastic tissue in the capsule of the lungs, and here you can see elastic tissue, these dark things here, elastic tissue in the air ducts itself. So for ventilation to occur, you have to have a cavity, you have the muscles that expand or reduce the size of that cavity, have a diaphragm that pulls down. As the diaphragm pulls down, it changes the partial pressure inside the lungs, and it causes a vacuum. Lungs come in to equalize. The air comes in through the conducting portion of the respiratory system to equalize the pressure in through there. Whenever the diaphragm is no longer contracted, the elastic tissue elastic components then cause the lungs to collapse. Now, in the conducting portion of the respiratory system, it does three important things. It cleans the air. You have hairs in your nose. It also have turbinates in through there that collects the air, collects the dust in the air. It warms the air, and it humidifies the air. If you've ever been jogging on a real cold day, you can feel the coolness in your lung, and it kind of burns because the lungs does not like cold air. And what's happening is the conducting portion can't warm that cold air fast enough for it to get to your lung, and that's the feeling that you're seeing. It also humidifies the air, and it has serous and mucous glands along the conducting portion of the respiratory system that adds fluid to the air to humidify it. There's also goblet cells in the respiratory epithelium, the main epithelium, in the conducting portion. And that has an important role too. One, it detoxifies gases is one of the things it does. It also presents odors to the olfactory cells so you can smell the tulips versus the roses. And in fact, it has chemicals that washes away one smell so you can smell the next one if you wanted to. Also, the mucus secreted by these cells traps dust. And dust gets trapped in there, as you can see. This is a goblet cell. This is a ciliated cell. Ciliated cells here. You can see the cilia on the surface. And what happens is the dust particles are trapped in the mucus, and they're washed away, like that boat just washed away out of the respiratory system, and it goes into the digestive system. You actually swallow it. Also, that mucus is important in terms of guarding against infection by the production of antibodies. All fluids of the body will have antibodies in them, all those that are secreted. And we have the conducting portion of the respiratory system goes to the outside, as you see, and there's a respiratory portion too, which has a gases exchange. And they start with the respiratory bronchioles. And we see a respiratory bronchiole. We'll see these later on in more depth. But they have simple columnar epithelium on the surface, and they have outpocketings to the alveolus, hence respiratory bronchiole. That goes to the alveolar ducts, which no longer has these epithelial cells of smooth muscle in them. And then we have the alveolar ducts to the alveolar sacs, and then they have the alveoli, which are the individual ones. And gas exchange occurs in these four components that we see there for gases exchange to occur. The other part is the conducting portion of the respiratory system. But in the respiratory portion, here you can see this the alveolar area where you have air inside and blood in the blood capillary, and see the blood-air barrier here. And what happens is the air does not go into the blood, it's the oxygen. So you have gas exchange, not air exchange, that goes in. So the carbon dioxide comes out into the airspace to be discharged, and oxygen goes into the blood to be discharged throughout the rest of the body. Now also the nose is very important in terms of the respiratory function. One is you have olfactory cells that allow you to detect danger if you smell some bad odor. It would also help you get your digestive juices going by the smelling of food, so that it's help in other body functions. It also conditions the air, it moistens the air, and it cleans the air. It does that. It cleans about 500 cubic feet. That's about the amount of air of a small room. It filters the dust out of these particles in the process, because as the air goes around these turbinates, it spins, and the dust particles, which is heavier, gets thrown against the side and gets caught in the mucus to be washed away. Also, the nose gives the tone, the resonance to our speech. Now there are different types of epithelial cells that are located in the respiratory system. One of those is stratified squamous epithelium. You may have that on the outside and the inside of your nose, stratified squamous epithelium. You also have it. There's another type is pseudostratified columnar epithelium, ciliated and goblet cells. And we see the cilia there, we see the basal bodies, the black line through there, and we call that respiratory epithelium because that lines the conducting portion of the respiratory system most of the time. And then also there's simple squamous epithelium, and that's what lines the respiratory portion of the respiratory system. The alveolus, alveolar ducts would have a simple squamous epithelium, which is a cell that actually touches the air. There is another type of epithelium. You have the olfactory epithelium, and you have multiple cells here. You can see these cells. You have support cells, and then you have these cells that actually are part of the nervous system that goes up. They have like a little cilia on the surface. You can see the cilia here, and a bulb up through there to detect smell. And then if you look at the locations of these things in your nose, you have stratified squamous epithelium because that's what you had from your skin, from your epidermis of your skin. It also has stratified squamous epithelium on the true vocal cords. And here you can see the true vocal cord right here. There's a muscle of the vocal cord, and that is to resist mechanical damage, because of vibration there you have to have stratified squamous epithelium on the surface. The rest of the portion that you have in the conducting portion is the respiratory epithelium, which is pseudostratified columnar epithelium, ciliated and goblet cells. And that's what you have in the nasal cavity. Inside the nasal cavity there, where you have your turbinates are located. Also, you have that in the conducting portion of the respiratory system. You also have it in your false vocal cords, as you see there. And it gives rise, when you get to the conducting bronchioles, the pseudostratified columnar goes to simple columnar ciliated cells that are on the surface here. And then the other type of epithelium, simple squamous, you have in the alveolar sacs, alveolar ducts, and the alveoli is where you have those. Here we see olfactory epithelium on this side and that side, a bony structure here, a rich lamina propria there, rich vascular supply. And we can see the olfactory epithelium has no goblet cells. So the respiratory epithelium has goblet cells, but the olfactory epithelium does not. It does have glands that discharge on its surface. Bowman's glands will discharge on its surface.
We want to acknowledge the original sources of images, drawings, and figures that might have been used during this presentation. This is the end of the respiratory system, that is the objectives and features, functions, ventilation mechanism, conducting portion of the respiratory system, epithelium types and locations.